Hi, this is Andy Jackson with a vocabulary strategy for 10th grade English language arts. The strategy I chose was Heads Up Vocabulary to go with the text A Rose for Emily by William Faulkner. While reading the short story, I found about 10 words that I feel would make great vocabulary words, and at least 2 I would define for my students to just avoid confusion because they're not really important to the text. I'll do an assessment of my students' knowledge by reading the passage aloud for the first time, and then instruct my students to highlight any words that are unfamiliar while they were listening. Following the reading, I would have students present what they didn't know, and I would note the words that were unfamiliar. If they aren't key words or words that really pertain to the main idea, then I would probably just define the words for them. For example, in this passage, the term druggist is used. It's not really important to the story and the main idea, but it's important to know that it is not the same as our slang. So this is an archaic term for pharmacist, but the students could easily mistake that for something else due to our current slang. Once the students have come up with unknown words, we will begin an investigation to try and form definitions with these words. To do this part, I would like to use a reproducible found in a real text, the Vocabulary Overview Guide. Once the students have a working knowledge of their vocabulary words, then we would play Heads Up Vocabulary. This is essentially the game Heads Up. The students make cards with their vocab words and then get into groups of 2 to 4. They then take turns holding a card that they don't look at to their forehead, and their peers give them clues to guess their word. Having already filled out their vocabulary overview guide should give them lots of clues and opportunities to guess their words correctly while playing the Heads Up game, and it should also help solidify their knowledge. I first found this strategy on Write On with Mrs. G's blog, but I have also been noticing it pop up in multiple places now, so it seems to be quite popular. I have seen this quote so many times. Scientists have recently determined that it takes approximately 400 repetitions to create a new synapse in the brain, unless it is done with play, in which case it takes between 10 and 20 repetitions. It blows my mind and feels equally believable and unbelievable that this is true. And yet, through my experience, when I was playing, I was generally the most engaged and active in those activities, which resulted in me learning these things very fast. Furthermore, whenever I went to bring up that knowledge, it would bubble up in a positive feeling and make holding on to that information easier. So even though this is a 10th grade English class, I still think it is so important to still create a playful classroom. These students are going to be told to be serious so many times between the time they enter my classroom and then move on to the next. The last thing that I think needs to be serious is learning vocabulary. I want learning to be fun when it can be, and we can talk about the serious topics during criticism. I think learning should be challenging, engaging, and fun. Heads Up Vocab meets these by allowing the students to play with classmates while they define and solidify their knowledge of their new words. I would hope that they would be able to find joy in playing this game instead of feeling force-fed words that they may feel are ridiculous or irrelevant to their learning. I think this strategy would be useful with this text because it does have a lot of unfamiliar language, such as musing, profoundly, beer, sibilant, macabre, and contemporary. These all pop up in this passage alone, which, if they only knew a couple of these words, would still leave the scene confusing and make it hard to understand how Miss Emily was treated in the community post-death, and so it would be harder to compare how they treated her while she was alive and after she had died. As for assessment, I would informally assess the students by seeing if they can retain knowledge at a later date by having them play the game a couple of times. That way I could see if they're still struggling to pick up on their clues that are being offered by their peers, or if they're catching on to the words and holding on to them. If I didn't want to do that, then I could also do a formal quiz, which I could also do in conjunction to the informal assessment. I could do a formal quiz, and this would allow me to quantitatively gauge their learning and their retention of their new words. Alright, well, that is all for me. I can't wait to use this strategy in my classroom. It sounds so fun, so engaging. I would play it over and over again personally, and I look forward to hearing feedback. Thank you.